I do want women to know that there is an alternative to suppressing their bodies with hormones, that they can see their body as a good and they can live in that body holistically.
Totally. Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Join co-hosts Jamie Rocci and Teresa Kenny as they educate women about the beauty of the feminine design and empower women to take charge of their health.
They're going to be so amazing. You're going to be so empowered by understanding your feminine genius and your hormone genius. I don't think I could live my whole life knowing this and not sharing it with anyone.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Hormone Genius Podcast. I am here in person, live in person with my co-host, Jamie Rocci. This is a special episode for a lot of reasons. One, we don't normally record together in person. Two, this is our season opener for season 7, which is so hard to believe. We say this every season, that we're on the 7th season of the Hormone Genius Podcast, and we're both kind of in summer break. Jamie's on vacation. She just happens to be vacationing in Omaha, Nebraska, where I live. And so it was a great opportunity for us to get together and to record in person. And today we're going to do, I think, a hot topic. We thought we'd get started in season 7 with a hot topic, and that's going to be talking about GLP medications for weight loss and whatnot. And Jamie's going to ask some questions because I do have some experience with prescribing these medications. So it'll be, I'm sure, a topic that many of you are interested in because I know my patients are very interested in it. But yeah, it's been great, Jamie, and we want to catch up today. We're going to, spend some time, or actually our families are going to spend some time together, which that has never happened before. So it's just really special.
I'm excited. So my husband and my children will be here for lunch. So you guys are making us lunch, which is so, so sweet. And we've never done that before. I love it when people ask, like, where do you guys live? Assuming that we are in the... But for those of you who just started listening to us maybe not long ago, I live in Iowa. Teresa lives in Omaha. So we're in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And we probably only seen each other in person, Teresa, like, I don't know, 10 times. Maybe we're edging up to like the 15s. But it's just so cool how these days you can form relationships and even have podcasts with people that don't live in your same town. So anyway, we're excited for lunch today. We're excited for our little summer vacation. And I'm also excited to ask you all the questions I have itching my brain about GLP-1s because it's the thing these days.
Yeah, totally the thing. I think there's a lot of opinions, excitement, negativity, social media influence. It's just a really big, big topic. So, it's just something I think we're just going to try to do a general overview of and hopefully just give you the tools to have a conversation with your healthcare professional about it if it was something that you're like, I'm really interested in what these medications could do for me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like any good thing, let's figure out what GLP-1s are. So what are GLP-1s? Teresa, let's start there. And then I'm going to follow the BRAIN acronym. I've introduced this a couple times, but for anybody who is considering starting a new medication or having a conversation with their doctor about anything, I like to use the acronym BRAIN. And I learned this acronym actually from my doula when I was getting ready to have a baby. It's hard to sometimes advocate for yourself with a doctor because, of course, we assume doctors know more, and they do in many ways. But we also want to follow our intuition and our gut. And so the BRAIN acronym helps us it helps empower us. So I'm going to tell you what BRAIN is, listeners, and then you can follow along, actually. So B is the benefit. What would be the benefit of said medication or said lifestyle change or whatever? So B is the benefit. R are the risks. What are the risks? A is alternatives. Are there any alternatives to the medication or the suggestion or what have you? I is intuition. So what does your gut say? What does your intuition say about the thing that's being offered to you as an option? And then N would be next steps. Now, what do I do if I do decide to do this thing? So that's kind of the acronym I'll follow, but I think it'll be a good modeling too for our listeners so that they can do the same thing when they are wanting to have a question or conversation with their doctor. Okay, so what are GLP-1s, Teresa?
Right. So we just want to understand that GLP is not just a medication. It actually is a naturally occurring hormone in our body. So they call it an incretin. An incretin is a secreted kind of hormone-like or messenger that the body has to regulate something. So GLP stands for glucagon glucagon-like peptides. So I know peptide is also a word that gets thrown a lot, and people are like, what are peptides? But the word peptide just means short chain amino acid. And this is a peptide. GLP is a peptide. Insulin is a peptide. There are many, many peptides. So it is a messenger that's secreted mostly by your intestines to regulate digestion, appetite, and blood sugar. Those are the main three things that it does. And it mostly is produced when you eat. So GLP is secreted naturally in the body when you ingest food, because what that's going to do is going to signal to your body, your brain, but also to the organs that it needs to signal to, which would be the pancreas mostly, to make a hormone called insulin. It also makes a hormone called glucagon. And those two hormones together, or peptides, those two peptides together will regulate how much insulin is released into the blood in order for the body to keep blood sugar stability. So it really is all about blood sugar stability. And so it's a naturally secreted hormone. That's why, kind of like when we talk about hormone therapy, in some ways, you could look at GLP is a good thing in terms of a medication that we figured out, because we were able to find a medication that actually mimicked kind of pretty exactly what happens in the body. And so the medications are referred to as GLP agonists, which again mimic the activity of glucagon-like peptides in the body, which is very helpful for regulating blood sugar. But what we'll find out is the medication, because it does it in a way that's kind of on like in a heightened way and has a huge half-life when we're talking about the injectables, will allow for appetite regulation, blood sugar control, reduction of insulin, which leads to weight loss.
Okay.
It's just like really, really fascinating stuff. And frankly, you could liken it, and my husband has said this before, it's almost like having air conditioning. Like nobody, like once you have air conditioning and you live in a hot place, you're like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. And it's changed our life for the good. And I would say this is such a dramatic breakthrough. There's been nothing else in weight loss besides bariatric surgery, which does have a significant amount of weight loss, but comes with a significant amount of negatives. This has been such a breakthrough for weight loss on a level that is not procedural or surgical. It's incredible. It really is. It's super amazing what it has done to the world of weight loss.
Okay. And for those listening, if you're hearing us say GLP-1, GLPs, peptides, that kind of thing, and then you also hear people talking about Ozempic, this is an example of a GLP, right? What are some other examples of medications that are being kind of thrown around that people may recognize as being a GLP?
Okay, so back when these medications started, they were only for diabetes. So they've been around, and this is why people will say we do have quite a bit of safety data on them, because they've been around for over 20 years because they were used for diabetes. The original ones were GLPs, but they had a very short half-life. The first one had to be given twice a day as an injection. They came out with a second one that was a once-a-day injection. And then finally, they came out with semaglutide, which was Ozempic. And that was for diabetes, and that was a once-a-week injection. And that was because they manipulated the particle to make it have a high half-life, which was huge. And it also had better outcomes. Like the original medications, I think there is a randomized controlled trial on weight loss with one of the original ones that was a daily medication, and it only had a 6.5% reduction, whereas in the biggest trial that first declared that this could be used for weight loss for semaglutide, which again, semaglutide is the generic word for Ozempic. And so when we say semaglutide, that's like not a brand name. That is what it is. It's semaglutide. And then the biggest study, it was called Step 1 for weight loss, which came out with a product branded as Wegovy, had a 15% weight loss in a period of 68 weeks, I think it was. So it was a huge amount of weight loss for a medication that was just, taken. But again, we've had these medications for a long time for diabetes, blood sugar control. Obviously, they would have seen weight loss. I just don't think people who were taking it for diabetes, there wasn't like the recognition of we're just taking this for weight loss. They were getting down their blood sugars. Type 2 diabetes, high blood sugars in the blood called hyperglycemia, which these medications lower blood sugar in a very unique way. Because if you think of a type 2 diabetic who takes insulin, insulin as a peptide, basically, our pancreas, our body, that we're supposed to make insulin. But with type 2 diabetes, what happens is you've got kind of like a double-edged sword of too much insulin in the blood because the person has been having too much excess energy, too much excess calories and carbohydrates, too much insulin in the blood, so that then the body becomes insulin resistant. So it is this double-edged sword of hyperglycemia and an actual resistance of the cell to be able to use insulin to take that fuel, that carbohydrate fuel or glucose, and use it in the cell for energy, which would prevent then storage. And so people who have type 2 diabetes are largely struggling with obesity. I mean, that would not be a shock, right? Because they have excess amounts of glucose running in their blood that they can't use for energy. And so what happens is that goes into fat storage. And what's unique about these medications, the GLPs, is without almost causing like hypoglycemia or dropping blood sugar too low, they regulate blood sugar without causing, because if you take too much insulin as a medication, you're going to drop your blood sugars too low. That's a huge risk of the medication, is just getting it right? Not causing too high, too low. These medications just do it. Because GLP, its natural substance, is able to kind of like regulate the production of insulin and glucagon in order to keep it balanced in a way that we've never been able to do before, And it also leads to appetite suppression and a decrease in food noise, which has been probably, you could say, the biggest, in some ways, benefit to people who really struggle with obesity from the standpoint of like, I just think about food and I have access to food all the time. So it makes it really hard to stick to a plan. Well, these medications, they actually reduce food noise significantly. And then the second one that was created after Wegovy, again, Wegovy semaglutide, it is a shot for weight loss once a week. They created a second one called Zepbound. That's the brand name. Tirzepatide is that molecule. And again, that is the 2 peptides. So it's GLP with GIP. So that's, I know, because, and like I said, now they're making a third one. It's going to have 3. And every time they add one, it's like it gets better. So tirzepatide performs even better for weight loss. So the biggest weight loss randomized controlled trial they did for tirzepatide was a 20% weight loss. And so it outperforms semaglutide, and it has less side effects, which has been a really good thing for people too. So like I said, it's really been amazing to kind of see how these drugs work. It's not that I think that they're like for everybody, and that's where we'll get into kind of the pros and cons of it. Right. But that's in a sense kind of the history of it. Diabetes drug, knew that it kind of helped weight loss, but then branded for weight loss, studied for weight loss, dosed for weight loss, which is a higher dose regimen, ramping it up instead of just blood sugar control, huge amounts of weight loss. And that has been the story kind of now. And I think they say 15% of Americans are now on a GLP. And they expect, in the next 10 years that will be close to 30 to 40%.
Macro. Okay, first I got to say, I don't know if I've ever heard the phrase food noise, okay? But the moment you said food noise, the moment I knew exactly what you meant. That's just an interesting phrase, but it's true, food noise. So we're constantly thinking about food. And when you were talking about food noise, then it led me to just how addictive certain foods are, and how when we think about being, addicted to something, there is a sense of victimhood. Not to say that we can't, set ourselves up by our bootstraps and do something about it, but it is very difficult to be in an addicted state, especially around something like you said you're exposed to all the time. It would be different if you were addicted, let's just say, to gambling. You have to get in your car, you have to drive to the thing, not maybe anymore because you could gamble online. But you know what I mean? Food is constantly surrounding us. So I think that food noise is a really important, interesting phrase. And I wanted to point that out.
No, it's so important. And from a affect the person's mental health. Yeah. I mean, I can't even tell you how people come in and they're just I cannot tell you the freedom I feel in living in my brain now. And I mean, I'm not someone who struggles with food noise, but I certainly know people who do. And it's hard to just like have that going on in your brain all the time. So to have freedom from that. And this is not like just, it just, I don't know, makes you feel sick so you don't think about food. It is literally, we have receptors in our brain for GLP, and especially for that second one in tirzepatide, GIP, they actually regulate dopamine response, dopaminergic. It's just a hard word to get out. It is like an actual thing that they're seeing in the brain. And because of that, Jamie, you mentioned addiction, it's already being studied for addiction. And there's already randomized controlled trials. There's one that's in its second. They just published in the Lancet about this, that it definitely reduces alcohol consumption. They've seen that in patients that just were taking it for obesity. It has a 70%, I think in one study, a 70% reduction in alcohol use. And so they're using it in addiction. And I expect there just to be more randomized controlled trials with this in terms of helping people. There's one for smoking. Maybe smoking might have been the 70% one, but either way, there is a significant reduction in use of things that people would like to not use if they're trying to be healthy by using these medications, because it is allowing them not to use that particular thing as a reward. And they're not getting the dopamine hit from it anymore. Okay. So that's another area of this that's, a huge benefit. We can talk about how these medications lower not just weight, they lower lipids, hemoglobin A1C, HSCRP, which is an inflammatory marker. They improve mental health, which kind of seems obvious. And semaglutide right now has the indication for improving cardiovascular health. Tirzepatide probably will at some point. They just haven't had the study done yet. But they're improving mortality in a sense. If they're going to improve diabetes and cardiovascular disease, obviously you're going to prevent death. And so this is not just weight loss, feel good about myself and my body. This is improving health outcomes to some of the most deadly diseases we have on the planet. Right. And that cannot be taken lightly. And that's why, I don't take it lightly in the sense of, if somebody wants this medication and they're asking me about it and they're well overweight, we got to really consider that this is a huge benefit to them and not be stingy about, because I think people just get like, I don't know anything about it. I don't know, it hasn't been studied enough. And they'll say things like that. I'm like, well, no, that's not true. And this could make a significant impact on this person's long-term health.
Right. Okay, 2 questions, because I really want to follow through the brain. We've been spending a lot of time with the benefit, which is awesome. So again, if you think that GLPs may be for you, ask your doctor what would be the benefits for them. Okay, but I do have a question. You were talking about dopamine and how did you say?
Dopaminergic.
Dopaminergic. Okay, so how does the brain know that the dopamine coming from food or any sort of addictive substance, smoking, alcohol, whatever, but we also get dopamine by just lots of things, going shopping, going on a walk, laughing, listening to music. Does it suppress the dopamine response? How does it target that dopamine so that it associates behaviors that have to do with food as opposed to anything that causes dopamine?
I don't think it would be any different in the sense that, it would regulate the hit you would get from an ice cream cone. Right. You know what I mean? Like anything.
Laughter. You know how we get dopamine from
media,
screen.
It's a really good point, Jamie, because there has been talk about whether being on these medications long-term could affect almost blunt mental health and maybe even cause low mood in some people. So these are the questions I think we do need to be asking, because so if it regulates the dopamine response and you think, well, it could regulate anything that gives us a dopamine hit, then there may be an aspect of that. And I was trying to look at the actual mechanism of action, but I haven't been able to pull it up real fast. So, but it definitely is something to consider. But I think if you're looking at obviously alcoholism, drug use, it's you're weighing
high stakes.
Right, high stakes, right? You're weighing. I have personally seen that most people, because of the weight is off, they're just happier. Yeah. And not having the food noise is happier. But I would say my husband and I talked about this because he's been on our podcast. He's talked about his GLP use, right? He used tirzepatide to lose over 50 pounds. And he, and that we'll get into this, Jamie, it's not a short-term medication. This is going to be one of the negatives that we'll talk about, but it's not a short-term medication. It's a long-term medication. Obesity is a chronic disease. Obesity is a chronic disease. It's not to be looked at as like, this is the 3-month, 6-month weight loss thing I'm doing. It's a chronic disease. And this is in studies proven that if people go off the medication, which after a year, 50% of people have dropped the medication, at least over 2/3 of those people will have all the weight gained back within a year after that. So it's not considered a short-term medication, but my husband and I were talking that he did wonder if it was like in a way changing the way his brain was working. And I don't think he's really figured that all out, but we have had that discussion. And these are the things that, again, long-term, probably those are things that should be kind of just discussed and looked at in terms of, again, the risk versus benefits of anything. Now, I would say when someone's in maintenance phase, like my husband is for using these medications, he's not using high dose. He's also not taking it every week. So it's like a maintenance phase. And we can talk about that, just like what that looks like, how you start it, but I think we should talk about a little bit more of the side effects first, and then kind of move on to like how this looks like in actual real life to a person taking it.
Totally. I'm thinking about how many questions I have and how maybe we'll have to do a part 2, because also I want to know about metformin.
Okay.
So when we think about hormones, we think about our listeners, let's say they have PCOS or PMOS now, some sort of metabolic dysfunction, we can assume GLPs likely also increase our fertility, of course, because it's managing our metabolism in a way that's more suitable. But I also think about metformin and how metformin was like the superpower. Oh my gosh, people made a big deal about metformin when it came out. And I don't know what the risks are since, metformin. And do you know what I mean? Like a few years, it was like the longevity drug, metformin was awesome. Right. That. So how would you compare, like if a woman went into the doctor and she struggled with weight or what have you, any sort of metabolic disease or dysfunction, when would a woman be prescribed metformin, and what's the opportunity for like a GLP instead?
Well, it's a lot of factors in that, Jamie. I mean, metformin, like weight loss wise, it's not even a comparison. It's just not even a comparison for weight loss. So for like the person's like, that's my goal, that's my focus, I'm going to be real honest and say you might lose 4 to 5 pounds on metformin, but that's about all you're going to get out of it. Mm-hmm. Unless you're doing significant lifestyle changes with it, and then you could lose more. I mean, I'm not saying, but if you're just like, do the drug alone, like these people in these studies, in a sense, this 15 to 20% of their own body weight coming off, I mean, that's just because they did the shot.
Oh,
that's not like we told you had to eat this much protein, exercise this amount of days. I mean, that's like just doing the medication. So metformin doesn't give you that benefit. Now, there's other benefits to metformin. I mean, it is a medication. I think it's been around for, like 30 years, probably it's been around. So we have tons of like long-term data on it. I think the whole longevity thing that's kind of gone by the wayside with it. It really is overall a safe drug. It doesn't have a lot of like long-term negative side effects, but it does reduce blood sugar by kind of preventing the liver production of sugar. So it does help, and that will help particularly with those with polymetabolic endocrine disorder or the PMOS now. That will help with their ability to ovulate, because insulin sensitivity is very important to the ability of hormones in the menstrual cycle to work correctly, right? I mean, we just know that. People who are severely or morbidly obese, they don't ovulate sometimes just purely out of just being so severely obese, because it is such an insulin block that it's creating the inability of LH to work and the gonadotropin. So it's a big deal. So people should use metformin in situations where maybe they're not like weight loss as a goal, or maybe they have a higher hemoglobin A1C, higher blood sugar, and they just want to get it down. Or if they're trying to get themselves to ovulate better with PCOS, PMOS, definitely a medication I would consider. Has side effects, but, long-term medication safety, good. But we're talking weight loss, it doesn't even compare.
Okay. Thank you. I was just thinking that as we were going on, thinking about the women struggling with weight and their metabolism. All right. So now moving on. R. So R is risk. Mm-hmm. In my mind, as you're talking, I'm thinking about risks already. Risks would be this idea potentially, and you can correct me, but the real root cause. So I love using the example of Do I love it? I can just relate to it. Like having an eating disorder. Okay. And so I have an unhealthy relationship with food. I know we talked about how it works with the brain and how it decreases maybe that reliance on food to fill that God-shaped hole. I think about that a lot. But, I think about how sometimes we lean on things external to us when the answer is internal. And sometimes we just need to get ahead so that we have the energy and the mental health to actually jump on the bandwagon of moving your body, of eating more protein, of this and that. So I realize there's definitely a spectrum of people who experience food in different ways, people who experience weight in different ways. If they're struggling with weight, how is it affecting their heart? And how is it affecting all these other things that weight and high fat becomes a risk factor for? So as you were talking, I just kept thinking about the women, especially in the coaching world. As we work with women that we're coaching, we're not prescribing peptides or GLPs. We're helping them eat better and with movement and this sort of thing. So what would be the risks of taking a GLP? And I'm going to tag along with what would be the ideal patient. And we already talked about it, but maybe talk about who isn't the ideal patient.
Sure. So if we're just like not ideal patient, probably as somebody who's not obese, like someone who's overweight, which that just goes into like how much overweight are you, right? If your BMI is over 30, you're obese for sure. But there's like a 26 to 29 that's in that overweight. And those people who also struggle with probably a history of eating disorders, or those people who have a history of pancreatitis, gallbladder disease, medullary thyroid cancer, or a family history of medullary thyroid cancer, those are probably the big ones. In terms of like probably not a good idea. Again, those who struggle with basically body image issues, you would have a severe risk of using that tool inappropriately. Those who are at risk, I think, again, are those who could be overweight, but could be also obese, even morbidly obese. And you've gone through what the negatives are, and they understand the negatives, they understand the risks that they're taking on. And they're like, yes, this is the medication I plan to use. And I understand that it's a long-term medication. So we just look at what are the side effects of GLPs. And this is across the board in terms of all of them. But, we'll say that the newer one, Zepbound or tirzepatide, again, has maybe a little less of the first side effect I'll talk about. And that's just GI effect. They all have GI side effects, but the worst effects are constipation, heartburn, or loose stools, and maybe just stomach upset, So those are the big ones. That happens in at least... it's nausea is 33 to 44%, diarrhea is 23 to 30%, vomiting up to 25% of people, constipation up to about 25% of people. So that is a problem for some people. Now, in my opinion, that can mostly be avoided by good dosing protocols. I would just say that. People who use it in a dosing way, they can actually avoid those side effects. But that's probably going to create a discontinuation, and it did in clinical trials, of even up to 10% right away. There is an increased risk of gallbladder issues, and I would say it's probably particularly those who, again, had a gallbladder issue. Now, not everybody knows that they're sitting with a gallbladder issue, but many people know their gallbladder has been a problem. Maybe it was a problem in pregnancy, whatnot. So that would be one that we'd be careful with. Pancreatitis, in all of the trials, it was almost non-existent, but I think there's just still this concern that it could cause pancreatitis, even though it really hasn't come out in studies. The thyroid cancer thing also, only in rodents, not in humans. I don't think people really actually think this is a big risk, but should be at least brought up that and it's only a particular type of thyroid cancer called medullary thyroid cancer. And it was only in rodent studies that they even saw an increased risk of that cancer. So they're just being careful with it. No increased risks were found of cancers, of any serious psychiatric disorders, any kidney failure. After discontinuation, though, a lot of people will gain the weight back. And that's a negative that we have to just talk about. So really the GI effects are the big ones that we counsel people on. And then bowel obstruction would be another, but again, super rare. But also if you just have gastroparesis, that would be another one. Gastroparesis, which is an incredibly slow gut, probably not the best medication, because these medications and how they work to decrease your appetite, they slow digestion. That's what they do, slow digestion. So as they slow digestion, your body has more time to get the blood sugar under control, But in that slowing of digestion can cause some definite GI issues.
Right. it seems like I've seen people, influencers that were heavy and then they became skinny really fast.
Yeah.
And we assume, and maybe I shouldn't assume, but if it's fast, I do assume, for right or wrong, that probably a GLP was involved.
Right.
And something that I've been hearing about more is just the concern for the loss of muscle mass so quickly, and then also just the state of our bone health. Because we do need fat, and I think about how, like you were saying, it takes proper dosing, but then it also takes a doctor you trust and that knows how to dose in a way that's best for the patient, even though, because I could just imagine if I've struggled with my body image my whole life, okay, and then I lose weight and I look the way I've always dreamed of, okay, I'm skinny and now I'm more confident, I can wear the clothes I want to wear, how then a patient going into the doctor, it almost like that could be addicting, where they're insistent with the doctor, continue.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we trust our doctors and how do we create that balance?
Yeah. This is why it's so important to have a relationship with your doctor that's trustworthy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, they have to know you, you have to know them. I would never just like give the drug to somebody that I didn't know that well and didn't know kind of like what their health history is and stuff like that. I have one patient that I kind of feel like is in that boat, Jamie.
Yeah.
And it kind of bothers me, but like, again, informed consent and, their right to treat is there too. But yeah, we have to do our due diligence in finding the right candidates and make sure that they're properly using these medications and using it with the right lifestyle. So Jamie, you brought up lean muscle mass loss. So it is a concern. Do I think that it should override someone's ability to get the medication? No, especially for those who are morbidly obese, because like, again, their risk of dying from diabetes and heart disease is much higher than the loss of lean muscle mass, but it also can be mitigated. So in studies, they've seen 20 to up to 40% loss of lean muscle, which just kind of goes with rapid weight loss. So we can encourage people to not have lean muscle mass loss by eating protein and really, making them track their protein.
Yeah.
If they track their protein and continue to get, at least, at the minimum, it would be like, a half a gram per body pound, but upwards of closer to 0.75 grams of protein per body pound of ideal body weight. You're going to prevent lean muscle mass loss with that. And then you've got to get them to believe that strength training is going to be a must. And that's just a must, period, from a longevity standpoint for everybody as it is. So protein and this ability to keep strength. Interestingly, they don't see bone loss.
Oh, they don't.
In studies. Now, these are shorter term studies, but they're not seeing like instant loss of bone. And they're actually looking at it as an agonist in some studies to help bone.
Really?
So that'll be interesting too. Those studies are kind of early phase, but they're not seeing bone loss. But it's a real thought logically that if you lose a bunch of muscle mass, you could lose bone, especially the older patients. And we have to, of course, think about that with older patients who want this medication. And really having them in a program, you could say,
right,
for keeping muscle mass on. But I don't think that is a game changer. I think people just need to be properly counseled. And when I prescribe these medications, again, we start really low dose. I start with half of even this first starting dose. Cool thing about these medicines, the way I do it usually is, you can really make the dosing kind of as slow as possible. If you're losing weight at half of even the starting dose, stay at that.
Yeah.
There's no reason to go up on the dose unless you're not losing weight.
Right.
So yeah, everybody's different. Some people have to go up on the dose, but I've had people never go up from the starting dose. And they lost 20 pounds, 30 pounds.
Oh.
And from a cost benefit, standpoint, that can be very helpful. And that's the other negative of this, Jamie. And when I counsel people, I'll say, cost, you have to think about it. It's not a short-term financial thing. If we're going to talk about it as a long-term medication, what does that mean? Do you have insurance coverage? Are we going to get it through compounding? So cost. And then again, I have to make them believe when you make the decision to do this medication, and this is where a lot of people are like, I think I'll pass and still work on diet and lifestyle. Fine. Is because I'm saying to them, you are hitching yourself to the wagon of this medication.
Yeah, right.
And I just don't want people to think they can just use these medications for 3 months. They can, I suppose, if they just want to lose weight for a wedding or something like that, but that's not how we should prescribe them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how these medications should be looked at, and they should be at least to some degree thought that you're going to be on this longer term.
Yeah. Okay. This is so good. This is so good, Teresa. Okay. So we talked about risks. We talked about some side effects. Now, going down brain alternatives. So alternatives could be our lifestyle, eating better, moving, whatever. But what are some other maybe medicines that could be alternatives to people who are looking for something different?
Yeah.
What other alternatives would you offer?
Okay. In saying this, again, I'm going to tell, and I would tell any patient, it's still not going to be anywhere close. But yes, I mean, if you, so for example, I saw a woman yesterday and she had done a new program for weight loss, and not that she hadn't done GLPs before, but she struggled with her weight on and off. Weight comes on, weight goes off. She does different diets, died keto. So now she found a new one. She came in today and I said, what's new? Weight loss. And I was like, oh, well, how did you do it? She had lost 30 pounds and it was some sort of a metabolic reset diet. And so can you lose weight and you lose a significant amount of weight without these medications? Of course you can, but they take a lot of times extreme changes in diet and lifestyle, which are just very difficult for people to continue. And this particular person, I was like basically listening to what she was eating, and I thought to myself, wow, that's a really hard life to live and do that long term. And like that would change your social life completely. So, there are diet changes that people can do, intermittent fasting. We've talked about keto. We've talked about paleo. We've talked about just a caloric deficit, eating higher protein. Are all those things potential valid tools? But if someone's like going to want to lose weight quickly, those things take longer. I always say those are long-term commitments over time to slower weight loss, which is amazing. So yes, and there are some medications like metformin. There are some medications like old school medications that help a little bit with appetite suppression, like phentermine was one, and that is still around. It just doesn't have a lot of weight loss associated with it. Metformin we talked about. There is supplements that kind of mimic metformin, like berberine, and there's some other ones like chromium picolinate that might help with cravings. So all of those could be tried, and optimizing your hormones. And this will go into perimenopause and menopause, Jamie. Like the bane of these women's existence is the 15-pound weight gain overnight through perimenopause to menopause. Hormone therapy, because we know that energy decreases, like your ability to burn energy does shift in menopause. That just makes it so much even harder for these women. But if we give them optimization of their hormones, sometimes weight loss will come off easier. And even there's going to be studies on menopausal women and using the combination of hormones and GLPs. Those studies will eventually be done, and they'll be using these as treatments for menopause weight gain.
Yeah, I bet.
And it already is, and I use it to some degree too. But this is just the beginning of again, the third one is coming out. We're 2 to try. That's going to be coming out. There'll be another one. Peptides are not going away, and I'm thankful for them. I mean, it's kind of like sad in some ways. Like even thinking of like the soccer thing and FIFA going on right now, and some of the people from outside countries coming in and being like, "You guys get free refills on pop?" Like, like in Europe, nobody gets free refills, and like they're just like, I'm sure, like us, like you guys eat so much, and then we have food on every corner, and so there's a sadness like to it.
Yeah.
That our population is so obese, and that like the medications are kind of like almost necessary to keep us balanced in a society where there is no balance around us.
Yeah.
But, again, it's kind of like one of those things, like my husband said, well, would you be the one not using your air conditioning?
Right.
Yeah. Would you gut it out and just suffer?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe there'd be some people that would, but there's a lot of people that are like, no, I think I would just like to use whatever technology helps me.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So,
and we're all so different. Everyone is so different. We have different stories. We have different motivations. We have different temptations. We're just so different. So I think it's also knowing thyself. Like it's sweet. So Zeke. So I have 2 boys here with me now, and they're playing with your 2 boys, Teresa. And Zeke is 9. Okay. And he is taking cold showers. And I'm like, I never said to take cold showers. I was never like a punishment of any kind or even an encouragement of any kind. He just somewhere heard that if you take cold showers, it's a good way to be disciplined. So that tells me a lot about his personality. But in my mind, I'm like, there would be a type of person like Zeke that wouldn't want air conditioning. It just so it.
Yeah.
So just I think it's knowing our personality, knowing our downfalls, knowing our temptations, knowing like there is a value in being in having of not getting what we want all the time and this and that, but it's always a balance. It's like, how at risk are you for these terrible conditions, problems that you either have or you might have based on, again, the weight. It just can be so dangerous. Okay, so intuition. If you're feeling like there's just something not there, educate yourself more. Like, where would you offer our listeners to learn more? Because we're talking about the I, which is intuition of brain, and then N is next steps. So what would you say would be an I and an N?
Yeah, so I think if your doctor doesn't have any knowledge about this, you probably are going to try to find someone who does. I'd prefer you to find a board certified doctor, not necessarily a functional medicine person. I'm not saying that they couldn't be helpful in this, but I do think that because these medications do have risks, we have to be, just and do our due diligence to prescribe them to the right people and monitor them. So I would talk to your doctor if he or she does have good knowledge about these, and people should be learning about these. Then you go through the options of how to get the medication. Like I said, it is cheaper. I think that the cost has gone down by, at least over half. So it is getting more affordable. I do use compound pharmacies. People in some areas would not scoff at that, but you have to have trusted compound pharmacies, which I believe that there are, that prescribe these medications and make it even more affordable. You have to be working with somebody who is not just focused on the drug, but also focused on your lifestyle and all of your other health things. So I would just have that conversation. Know that this medication is an option. It's not scary. I think people have been thought that it's very scary. And then they'll bring it up and like, oh, aren't those super bad? Aren't those so bad for you? And I'm like, actually, they're not. Mm-hmm. Are there some risks? But there are to almost everything we talk about. Mm-hmm. So you do need to know that these can be life-changing for some people. They're not for everybody, but you got to have the conversation with a trusted healthcare professional. And you can do your own research, obviously. Everybody has access to studies, but the way I would do it is really look at, something where you're like, give me the clinical studies or the evidence behind this, that evidence behind the outcomes, and then the risks associated with it. Instead of just going on like public opinion boards, listening to influencers, mm-hmm. You have the right to go, even if you went into an AI chat GPT, you can get the clinical studies for things. You can get the actual data yourself. And that's where I would start, is actually looking at the data and the statistics and not use, people that are already going outside of what the evidence already is. Yeah. Something we didn't talk about, Jamie, and I know people will be interested, is just how these medications might be used for other conditions. And there is some preliminary evidence that it does help arthritis. That it helps. This is a true evidence. It does help sleep apnea. In fact, tirzepatide is FDA approved for sleep apnea. So if you have sleep apnea, you can get this medication covered by your insurance, tirzepatide. But there is evidence that it does help with arthritis, the pain with arthritis. Again, we know because of the studies that have been done that it targets natural killer cells and cytokines and inflammatory chemicals. So it is a world that's coming where these medications are going to be used for inflammatory disorders and other things. So, buckle up, because we'll have to do a GLP times 2, 3, I'm sure in the future to talk about what's coming and what we're seeing in the data. So awesome. Yeah, Jamie, this has been fun.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. And so for those of you listening, hopefully you now know a little bit more about GLPs than you did before. We talked about the benefits, the risks, alternatives, what does your gut say, and then also some next steps. So thanks, Teresa, for educating us all about this.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Hormone Genius Podcast. Please remember to share our podcast with your friends and family, and also follow us on social media. If you were not aware, we have a YouTube channel. So if you could like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop with all of our latest episodes, we would appreciate that. Thank you so much for your support. We are excited to journey alongside you as you discover the beauty and the genius of your hormones.